Hey everyone, Mark here with North of the Wall Garage. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually bought a Nissan, specifically the 2025 Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Quick disclaimer in this video, this will be mostly me talking about my purchase decision and what impressed me about the Armada and what I looked at and why I went with it. If you don't like me talking, I'm sorry in advance, but hope you hang with me and learn why I discovered this Nissan Armada and why I ultimately chose it as someone who had no interest looking at Nissan in the first place. Never in a million years did I think I would buy a Nissan. I previously had my Lexus GX550. I've been a Toyota and Lexus guy for a long time now. And Nissan has a really bad reputation amongst car enthusiasts. And that really started maybe 10, 15 years ago with their CVT transmissions and all of their small cars and even small SUVs. And even as far as the Armada is concerned, the Armada was always a little bit toned down from the global platform of the Patrol. Whereas Toyota's Land Cruiser, they brought the full Land Cruiser to the United States up until 2021. But for Nissan, the Armada was always a toned down Patrol with worser mechanicals until now. The 2025 Armada, the Y63 generation, is a legitimate Patrol mechanically and appearance-wise. I originally completely dismissed the idea of buying a Nissan in the first place due to their very clear depreciation issues. Typically, a Nissan is one of the highest depreciating cars you can buy, but they are giving money off sticker on this truck. So as I had said in some of my other Armada, Sequoia, and GX550 videos, the Armada, this one would be stickered around $80,000, but I got it for $71,000 brand new. So to take the money off up front to me is more valuable than getting it on the back end off resale. So I was more than happy to do that deal. And it seems like so far, based on the owners groups, folks aren't having many issues with these. There's a couple things I'll walk through with the Armada that I've encountered that have been little bit issues, little small things. But so far I've put over 200 miles on the truck and it's been great. So the only issue I've run into, in 200 miles of driving is a little bit of the CarPlay integration. Now that's an issue a lot of different manufacturers have. And in the case of Nissan here, their infotainment system is run on like a Google platform. So when I first bought the car and drove it, the integration with the phone was really pretty bad. It would kind of cut in and out, or it was hard to like access CarPlay directly, even using like hitting certain buttons, it wasn't working. But then after that first drive, everything worked perfectly. So maybe it's just a weird like startup thing and it needed time to kind of get used to the signal on my phone. Who knows? But now it works really well. And the only reason it's not connected right now is because I have to have Bluetooth off of my phone to record. Other than that, the only other issue I've had is placing the vehicle into reverse. The mirrors fold inwards and then down. And the one thing I've experienced is that in doing that, back up and then a switch back to drive, every now and then that mirror doesn't come up. In this case, of course, it's working perfectly. But there have been, maybe 3 or 4 times where that mirror stays down and then I just have to go and manually actuate the mirror with the buttons. So not a huge deal, but those are the only 2 things I've really run into. In terms of just comparing it to the Sequoia, which I've done a big video on that, so I highly recommend you check that out if you haven't seen it yet. The camera feed is a little bit choppier than the one in the Sequoia, so that's just kind of a quality aspect, I suppose, where the camera reads just fine, but ultimately it needs a little bit more time to kind of get a smoother signal, whereas the Sequoia, you'd flip the cameras on, it would work right away. But these are really all minor things. The performance of the car, the day-to-day handling, the day-to-day sound, everything works really, really well and much better than the competition. I'm hopeful most of these issues are probably just software issues that could be fixed at a regular service or even over the air. So if those are the only issues with this truck, now again, only had it 200 miles, I'm very, very bullish on the ownership experience of this Nissan Armada. Another thing to note here is I have the Nissan Axis wheels. These are, technically speaking, a dealer-installed option to size down to an 18-inch wheel. These are the stock Armada Pro 4X wheels. They're a 20-inch wheel on a 275/60 tire. And so going to an 18-inch wheel, you get the benefit of more sidewall. And this is basically the biggest tire you can run on a stock Armada. It's a 275/70/18. Amazingly, because the glass is double pane, it's incredibly quiet even with the off-road tires. Certainly you hear the tires at highway speed. Compared to the Sequoia, even with the roof rack off, this is much quieter. The other thing that's really stood out to me, honestly, is how comfortable these seats are. The Sequoia seats were fine, but they were, I guess, sort of hard and not very contoured, whereas the Nissan Armada seats, not only do you sink into them, but they're nicely contoured. So massage isn't available on the Pro 4X trim like I have. If you go Platinum Reserve, you can get it. But honestly, after having the massaging seats in my GX550 over Trail Plus, it's almost more of a novelty that you use a couple times and then it's really just not ever utilized. So I would much rather take a comfier seat, which this Armada has, versus a harder seat or even a harder seat with massage. The other thing I felt the Armada does very well is actually the sound system. And not that I care much about the sound system, honestly, but the Sequoia's was so bad with the fake engine sound kind of pumped over the music, and it just sounded really cheap to me. Whereas the clip system in the Armada is very, very good. It reminds me of the Bose system and the Yukon AT4 Ultimate. And that's really what was so shocking about the Armada to me, was that, you know, we had money down on a GMC Yukon AT4 Ultimate with the diesel engine. And I felt very confident in that choice just based on the fact that I love diesel engines. I hadn't heard too many bad things about the Yukon diesel versus the V8. The V8 has a lot of problems. And generally speaking, I've always liked to buy American when I can, so it was an encouraging decision for me. I thought, you know, let's go for it. However, first of all, the diesel engines are really hard to get in the spec that you want. They're basically order only, and then GM builds the V8s first. So to get a diesel Yukon that you want spec'd in a certain way, there's a very long wait associated with that. So that was a little bit off-putting. I wanted the extra space sooner rather than later, so I started looking at other stuff. And that's actually what led me to the Sequoia in the first place. So the Sequoia I felt was the default option. Being a Toyota guy myself, I felt the Sequoia was a good option, didn't have to think too much about it. It was gonna be fine, it was gonna retain its value, it was gonna drive fairly well, and it was gonna drive like something I was used to based on being a Toyota product. I was hoping for it to be a little bit closer to the Lexus in terms of feel. However, the Sequoia, honestly, despite the huge power, it was very, very fun to drive very fast. It reminded me a lot of my old Tacoma in terms of build quality. I bought a Tacoma in 2017, a Tacoma TRD off-road in 2017, brand new. And it was a great truck. It was my first new car ever. I really enjoyed it, and I paid $31,000 for it brand new. The Sequoia was $83,700, and it reminded me of the Tacoma and the way it drove. So that's what was so appealing about the Yukon, was that the Yukon had air suspension, it had a lot of luxury features, definitely was not much of an off-roader. Yeah, they have the bigger tires on the AT4, but those lower control arms sag so low. So I was a little concerned about clearance in the snow and then ultimately the sand where I like to drive on the beach. But I figured, let's give it a try and try something new. But what was really off-putting was that the sticker on that AT4 Ultimate GMC Yukon was $96,000 for a diesel Yukon. So I didn't feel like it was a good value, but I had confidence that, hey, you know, maybe this will last a while and I can make that work. But that was really the top of my budget. I wasn't gonna go any more than that. I feel like $100K for a family SUV is honestly kind of ridiculous. So then comes the Armada. Credit to several of you who encouraged me to go check it out, because that changed my opinion big time on Nissan. Driving it around, it felt every bit as good as that $96,000 Yukon AT4 Ultimate, which is billed as a luxury SUV now, equivalent to a Denali. The Armada Pro 4X felt every bit as good, every bit as composed, if not better, if not quieter, and if not better materials in the cabin itself. And so I got into the Armada for $71,000 brand new, a $25,000 savings versus what would have been the GMC Yukon. I understand this thing will probably depreciate. I am genuinely hopeful it will last a long time and perform well, and I'll get my money's worth out of it. But I have to tell you, if you have any doubts, please just go drive one. Please go drive one. The powertrain is incredibly refined, the transmission shifts smoothly, and the problems so far are really just mostly CarPlay integrated. So there will be a lot more content with the Armada, and of course my other cars as well. I have a backlog of videos with different sports cars and stuff like that that I'll be getting out. But I hope you stick along for this ride, and I hope you open your mind to what Nissan is doing right now. They're doing an excellent job with this new Armada, and I hope that that spreads down to the rest of the line. And for those of you who are worried about Nissan's bankruptcy situation, although obviously I can't speak to that directly, I think one of the things to note is GM has been bankrupt before. A lot of car manufacturers have been bankrupt and came back better. So even if Nissan does eventually declare bankruptcy, I do believe they can reform their line. They can get a better global platform, better global cars out there, and compete in the marketplace even better. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.